CDC has identified a case of coronavirus in Washington state, the Wuhan strain of this. If you remember SARS, that affected GDP, travel-related effects. Have you been briefed by the CDC?
I have.
Are there words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
But now we're working very strongly with China on the coronavirus. That's a new thing that a lot of people are talking about. Hopefully it won't be as bad as some people think it could be, but we're working very closely with them and with a lot of other people in a lot of other countries, and we think we have it very well under control. The virus. They're working hard. Looks like by April, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. I hope that's true. But we're doing great in our country. China, I spoke with President Xi, and they're working very, very hard. And I think it's going to all work out fine. Rough stuff, I tell you, rough stuff. But I think it's going to work out good. What do you have, a very small number of people in the country right now with it? It's like around 12. Many of them are getting better. Some are fully recovered already. So we're in very good shape. I think it's going to work out fine. I think when we get into April and the warmer weather, that has a very negative effect on that and that type of a virus. So let's see what happens, but I think it's going to work out fine. Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that, right? Coronavirus. They're politicizing it. We did one of the great jobs. You say, how's President Trump doing? They go, oh, not good, not good. They have no clue. They don't have any clue. And this is their new hoax. But, we did something that's been pretty amazing. We're 15 people in this massive country. And because of the fact that we went early, we could have had a lot more than that. We're doing great. Our country is doing so great.
Are you also considering a national emergency declaration that would allow states and local governments to cap FEMA aid?
I don't think you'll need that because I really think we're in extremely good shape. We're prepared for anything, and we could always do that at a later date if we need it, but I don't think we need that. We're prepared, and we're doing a great job with it, and it will go away. Just stay calm. It's going to go away. It's going to go away. I was watching Scott this morning, and he was saying within 2 months. But, in the meantime, we want to lose as few people as possible. So important. And what is the number as of this morning? Is it 32? You could tell me. Is it 32 deaths? Steve, around that. I mean, think of it, the United States, because of what I did and what the administration did with China, we have 32 deaths at this point. Other countries that are smaller countries have many, many deaths. 32 is a lot. 32 is too many. But when you look at the kind of numbers that you're seeing coming out of other countries, it's pretty amazing when you think of it. It's a very contagious virus. It's incredible, but it's something that we have tremendous control of.
You said that you were not responsible for the testing shortfall. Very simple question. Does the buck stop with you? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job. And it started with the fact that we kept a very highly infected country, despite all of even the professionals saying, no, it's too early to do that. We were very, very early with respect to China. And we would have a whole different situation in this country if we didn't do that. I would rate it I would rate ourselves and the professionals. I think the professionals have done a fantastic job. And I've always known this is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. All you had to do is look at other countries. I think now it's in almost 120 countries all over the world. No, I've always viewed it as very serious. There was no difference yesterday from days before. I feel the tone is similar, but some people said it wasn't. Clinical trials are already underway for many new therapies, and we're working on scaling these to allow many more Americans to access different drugs that have shown really good promise. We've had some really good promise. It is known as a malaria drug, and it's been around for a long time, and it's very powerful. But the nice part is it's been around for a long time. So we know that if things don't go as planned, it's not going to kill anybody. When you go with a brand new drug, you don't know that that's going to happen. You have to see and you have to go long test. But this has been used in different forms, very powerful drug in different forms. And it's shown very encouraging, very, very encouraging early results.
This is yet another attempt to impeach the president. And sadly, it seems they care very little for any of the destruction they are leaving in their wake. We must test for the virus in order to stop the spread of it. What could be a very great recession. Some predicting even a depression.
At worst case scenario, it could be the flu.
I feel like the more I learn about this, the less there is to worry about.
I was about to say the same thing. We don't have immunity to this virus. It's a new virus. It's a pandemic strain of a virus we haven't seen before.
All the talk about coronavirus being so much more deadly doesn't reflect reality. Without a vaccine, the flu would be far more deadly. We are facing an incredibly contagious and dangerous virus that is moving across the world from one hotspot to another.
We're going to call out anyone and everyone who's using this virus as a political weapon against the president. The standard flu every single year kills tens of thousands of Americans. We are now entering what will be the crucial defining 15-day period as it relates to this virus, where we must slow the spread of coronavirus.
It's actually the safest time to fly. Everyone I know that's flying right now, terminals are pretty much dead. We have a responsibility to slow down this virus and to think of other people during this time. And so if you can keep your distance and prevent someone from getting close to you that might be sick, you could save your family, you can save the elderly, and help our country as a nation.
It is absolutely disgusting that Democrats are seeking to use this complex virus to score cheap political points. This dangerous health crisis could dovetail quickly into a political crisis, already feeling economic ramifications of it all.
Dr. Redfield, will you commit to the CDC right now using that existing authority to pay for diagnostic testing free to every American regardless of insurance?
Well, I can say that we're going to do everything to make sure everybody can get the care they need.
Reclaiming my time. Dr. Redfield, you have the existing authority. Will you commit right now to using the authority that you have vested in you under law that provides in a public health emergency for testing, treatment, exam, isolation, without cost, yes or no?
What I'm going to say is I'm going to review it in detail with CDC and the department.
Reclaiming my time. Dr. Redfield, respectfully, I wrote you this letter along with my colleagues, Rosa DeLauro and Lauren Underwood, Congressman Underwood and Congressman DeLauro. We wrote you this letter 1 week ago. We quoted that existing authority to you, and we laid out this problem. We asked for a response yesterday. The deadline and the time for delay has passed. Will you commit to invoking your existing authority under 42 CFR 71.30 to provide for coronavirus testing for every American regardless of insurance coverage?
What I was trying to say is that CDC is working with HHS now to see how we operationalize that.
Dr. Redfield, I hope that that answer weighs heavily on you, because it is going to weigh very heavily on me and on every American family.
Our intent is to make sure every American gets the care and treatment they need at this time of this major epidemic, and I'm currently working with HHS to see how to best operationalize it.
Dr. Redfield, you don't need to do any work to operationalize. You need to make a commitment to the American people so they come in to get tested. You can operationalize the payment structure tomorrow.
I think you're an excellent questioner, so my answer is yes.
Excellent. Everybody in America hear that. You are eligible to go get tested for coronavirus and have that covered regardless of insurance. Please, if you believe you have the illness, follow precautions. Call first. Do everything the CDC and Dr. Fauci, God bless you, for guiding Americans in this time. But do not let a lack of insurance worsen this crisis.
And I would just like to echo what you said. It's a public health, a very important public health, that those individuals that are in the shadows can get the health care that they need during the time of us responding to this outbreak.
My fellow Americans, tonight I want to speak with you about our nation's unprecedented response to the coronavirus outbreak. We have been in frequent contact with our allies. We have seen dramatically fewer cases of the virus in the United States than are now present in Europe. The European Union failed to take the same precautions and restrict travel from China and other hotspots. Earlier this week, I met with the leaders of health insurance industry who have agreed to waive all co-payments for coronavirus treatments, extend insurance coverage to these treatments, and to prevent surprise medical billing. To keep new cases from entering our shores, we will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days. This is the most aggressive and comprehensive effort to confront a foreign virus in modern history. This was something that happened that was, some people would say, an act of God. I don't view it as an act of God. I would view it as something that just surprised the whole world. And if people would have known about it, it could have been stopped in place. It could have been stopped right where it came from, China. If we would have known about it, if they would have known about it.
Well, you know, it is, things are moving rapidly, but there does continue to be a disconnect, David Ignatius.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me go to Jonathan Lemire first, since he's White House reporter. There's still, Jonathan, this disconnect between what we're hearing from the scientists and what the President of the United States is saying. Remember, from the very beginning, you had the President saying that it was only a handful of people, 14, maybe 15, who would all be down to zero in a week. At the same time, the CDC was expressing real concern. Then the President talked about the coronavirus going away in April magically. When things got warmer, he said it was going to go away magically. It was going to just disappear, while his scientists were again warning Americans. Yesterday, you had the President of the United States saying that it's all under control, while his scientists are all saying the same thing. It's going to get worse. We don't know how bad it's going to get. You even had some irresponsible members of Congress, remarkably enough, Republicans, of course, I've got to say that, sadly, as a former member, saying, oh, go out to your restaurants, go out to your one. I think Devin Nunes even said, go out to pubs. That is the worst actual advice I've heard since a monologue was put on a certain network, suggesting that this was all a great hoax to take down the President of the United States. So you have the CDC, doctors, scientists, experts from across the world saying one thing, and then you have the President of the United States completely disconnected from his own staff saying quite another. What's going on inside of the White House? Talk about the battle, actually, for the heart and soul, not of the country, but of this administration.
Life has changed in America, and the president doesn't want to admit it, Joe. That's where we are right now, is that it is one thing for a commander-in-chief, for the executive of the United States, to preach calm, to be reassuring. That's okay. That's part of the job. But it's very different right now for the president, who seems to have, at least publicly, his head in the sand as to what is really happening. On Friday, after declaring the national emergency, which was a step that was needed, he was urged to do by members of both parties, including some of his closest advisors, he reluctantly got there because he was afraid that it would send a bad signal to the markets, acknowledging just the severity of this crisis. But when he did it, and the markets responded well on Friday, they did. And he then proceeded to take a victory lap on Twitter about it. We saw him over the weekend appear into the White House briefing room twice, once Saturday, once Sunday. On Saturday, wearing another campaign hat, suggesting that this is all going to be over soon, that Americans, again, stay calm. That's the right thing to say. But to not acknowledge the severity of the crisis is very different. Within the White House, we've had a couple of different factions here. There is a growing sense among top advisors, including Vice President Pence, Dr. Fauci, and others, to be more candid about where things are going, to acknowledge the American people that things are going to get worse before it gets better. Others, including Jared Kushner, Stephen Miller, are focused more on trying to be more prop up the markets, to sort of downplay the severity of this incident, of the spread of this virus, even though we are seeing, of course, cases tick up day after day. The president and the vice president urged Americans not to make runs on grocery stores, saying just buy for the week ahead.
Right.
And we saw, of course, last night, the CDC, against the backdrop of the Democratic debate, suggest that, we now, Americans should, for the next 8 weeks, should avoid gatherings of 50 or more. And that is going to be a thing that changes American life.
It will change American life, but there's not a scientist, there's not a doctor. I mean, I'm reading conservatives who have apologized for Donald Trump for 3.5 years when there was nothing left to defend, who are actually saying this is serious. Yeah. Listen to the scientists. I'm seeing it on blog posts from pro-Trump people. I'm seeing it everywhere, and yet the President of the United States, David Ignatius, is still saying we've got this completely under control. It's going to be okay. Things are going to disappear. And David, here's the impact of it, okay? You can have Dr. Fauci and every other great scientist going out telling people the truth, but I'm still getting emails from friends of mine who support Donald Trump, who are saying, the president says this is overblown. I can still go about my daily life. You see pictures from Disney World last night, just shocking pictures from Disney World with thousands and thousands of people crammed together, packed like sardines on Main Street in Disney World. And you sit there thinking, how many people there had the coronavirus and don't know about it? How many were they spread to? And how many seniors are now going to die in the state of Florida and across the nation because people like that would go last night say, well, the president says it's not much of a big deal. So that's fine. So the president goes out and says it's not a big deal. Then he gets all of his scientists telling us how serious this is going to be. And people just listen to the president. He's still responsible for this chaos going on. Why can't he listen to his own scientists?
You know, Joe, that's part of the mystery of Donald Trump. He lacks the self-confidence, the self-knowledge, the wisdom, perhaps, to listen to those who really are experts. I find it a little chilling just to watch all of those experts, the key people we're depending on, crammed up on a podium behind the president because he wants that show, and they're all, did not much social distance there. I wish they'd give each other a little more space. I don't want anybody too near Dr. Fauci. This period that we're living in, I don't think any of us have ever lived through anything quite like this, is giving us a lesson in what leadership is in the absence of it. When I read my history, I see Washington in the early years of the Revolutionary War faced terrible adversity. Nothing went right. You know, one failure after another. And yet he kept the confidence of the troops and the country. Same thing with Lincoln. Lincoln's search for the general who could win, the defeats early in the Civil War, the sense of despair, desire to abandon this effort. Same thing with Franklin Roosevelt during World War II. Roosevelt was a steady, calm presence. He trusted his generals. He trusted his scientists. He conveyed that sense that he was the nation's father, if you will, and he was going to help everybody get to where they needed it. I hate to be partisan, but to quote something Joe Biden said last night in the debate, this is bigger than any of us. That's the one thing that doesn't come through when Donald Trump speaks, is that sense of humility, which really is at the core of real leadership always.
Well, it is. And Ed Luce, you look at the disaster that the testing rollout was. And again, I've got to say, Joe Biden easily had his best debate last night talking about testing, how he would handle testing. But the president's been disastrous on testing. We're going to talk about the airports yesterday in a second, but no pre-planning for that either. That was disastrous across the United States. Again, confining thousands of people in tight areas, which obviously will spread the pandemic as well. But there you have, again, the president at the center of all of this, still not seeming to take any of this seriously. Again, having his people make the right moves now, but the president's own words still giving deniers a reason to say what Devin Nunes said yesterday: go out to your pubs, stop being a baby, go out and hang out wherever you go. And what the president doesn't understand, Ed, is that spooks the markets. This isn't about me, right? They think this is about the media, like Trumpists. This isn't about me. When the president speaks that way, I know the president. I know his failings. I know what he's incapable of. It's the markets, Ed, that when they hear the president of the United States speak that way, saying we have it all under control when he has no idea what the next 3 months are going to look like, the markets crash. And it's exactly what they did overnight.
So the president was clearly delighted by the Fed's move yesterday to slash interest rates to zero, have $700 billion of quantitative easing, use that bazooka. But what he said shortly after the Fed did that, which was we have tremendous power and control over this virus, negated what the Fed did, because it indicated that the leadership was not aware of the scale and duration of this problem, something that the Fed, by its actions, had just signaled it did grasp. So again, very strong mixed signals there that are being reflected by the market reaction this morning in Europe and Asia, all down. Dow futures all sharply down. I think, the sort of thing I always relate to, and I'm sure we all do in our own way, is that that United Airlines pilot, who says, oh, just a slight delay, 10 minutes, we should be off and taxiing.
Yeah.
And then half an hour later saying, well, actually, it's a maintenance problem. It's going to be a couple of hours. And then 4 hours later saying, sorry, the flight's cancelled. If you give bad news early, people trust you. And Donald Trump keeps talking happy talk, happy clappy talk,
Yeah.
and he keeps getting contradicted by the people working for him.
Well, and by the reality.
Well, the thing is, Mika, it's something that we've been saying, literally saying, you can go back and look at the tapes, for 3 weeks. Give them the worst news. Prepare everybody, prepare the markets, tell them how bad it's going to be.
Get in front of it.
Get in front of it, then the markets will prepare for that, and they'll move on that. And then if you do a good job, you beat expectations and you're rewarded for it down the road. But Ed, just like you said, he continues to talk happy talk, and there's a string of quotes that are going to follow him for the rest of his political life, saying that there's only 14 people will be down to 0 pretty soon. This is going to disappear magically in April.
Everyone
when
who
it
wants
warms
a test
up, everything's
gets a
fine.
test.
Anybody that wants a test gets a test, and it goes on.
No tests here.
And he once again this weekend talked about demoting the Fed chairman. The Fed chairman decides to reduce interest rates down to 0. I had complained last week that they were reduced half a point. The markets crashed because they saw that as panic. That he needed to leave. The Fed needed to leave something in their arsenal for when things really got bad. Because things, as Dr. Fauci said, are still going to get worse. We have nothing left in our arsenal when you do what the Fed did yesterday and reduce rates to 0. There's not much left in the arsenal for when things really get bad 3-4 weeks from now.
That is true, but if you sort of keep with the analogy of keeping your powder dry, look, when your front lines are being overrun, you don't want to keep your powder dry. You want to use your powder. So I think what Jay Powell signaled yesterday was the Fed will do whatever it takes, and there are many other things it can do beyond sort of going into negative interest rates. It can guarantee lending to small businesses, keeping credit flowing through the economy. But what Jay Powell emphasized very strongly yesterday is that this is a matter for fiscal policy. This has got to be Congress. It's got to be strong public support for businesses that are failing, for payrolls that can't be met, for healthcare workers to have childcare so that they can continue to do their healthcare work. This is a fiscal question now. And so I think the Fed has done whatever it takes and said, now it's your turn. And that's going to require very strong sort of political signaling from Trump. And he's going to have to talk to Pelosi at some point. He's got to overcome his inhibitions on that score.
Dismissing the crown jewels of U.S. intelligence, the Presidential Daily Brief.
I don't have to be told, I'm like a smart person. I don't have to be told the same thing in the same words every single day.
Dr. Fauci said earlier this week that the lag in testing was, in fact, a failing. Do you take responsibility for that? And when can you guarantee that every single American who needs a test will be able to have a test? What's the date of that?
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all because we were given a set of circumstances and we were given rules, regulations, and specifications from a different time. Wasn't meant for this kind of an event with the kind of numbers that we're talking about. And what we've done is redesigned it very quickly with the help of the people behind me. And we're now in very, very strong shape. I think we'll be announcing, as I said, Sunday night. And this will start very quickly. And we'll have the ability to do in the millions over a very, very quick period of time. So no, and what we have done, and we are going to be leaving a very indelible print for the future in case something like this happens again. but it was and that's not the fault of anybody, and frankly, the old system worked very well for smaller numbers, much smaller numbers, but not for these kind of numbers. Tony, maybe you'd like to say something?
Will you have, yes, please, by Sunday night, will every American be able to get a test?
So just to reiterate what I said to many of you multiple times, it's a distance of a system. The system was not designed for what it was designed for. It worked very well. The CDC designed a good system. If you want to get the kind of blanket testing and availability that anybody can get it, or you could even do surveillance to find out what the penetrance is, you have to embrace the private sector. And this is exactly what you're seeing, because you can't do it without it. So when I said that, I meant the system was not designed for what we need. Now, looking forward, the system will take care of it.
And Mr. President,
And
with respect,
interestingly, if you go back, please, if you go back to the swine flu, it was nothing like this. They didn't do testing like this, and actually they lost approximately 14,000 people, and they didn't do the testing. They started thinking about testing when it was far too late. What we've done, and one of the reasons I think people are respecting what we've done it very early. We've gotten it very early, and we've also kept a lot of people out.
Mr. President,
yes,
the
please, go
last
ahead.
administration
Please.
said that they had tested 1 million people at this point. You've been
Well, ask them
president
how
for
they did with
3
the
years.
swine flu. It was a disaster.
But with respect, you've been
Next,
president
please.
for 3 years,
Next,
and
please.
Wuhan was suffering.
They had a very big failure with swine flu.
A chance to get the hard-to-find H1N1 vaccine produced a polite stampede of parents and not-so-happy children in Fairfax, Virginia this morning.
Oh yeah, it's definitely hard to get. It's the only place you can find it right now.
Whole families skipped Saturday morning cartoons and braved the rain and the line to snap up 12,000 doses of the drug.
No, I don't have the shot, but he has the shot, and I feel a lot better. That's why I waited in a line for 5 hours.
5 hours?
5 hours.
Many clinics like this one limited their supply to those most at risk, babies, young children, and pregnant women. The virus is not so selective. The Centers for Disease Control says H1N1 has spread to 46 states. More than 1,000 Americans have died, and more than 20,000 have been hospitalized. Experts say it will likely spread further. So much like a disaster declaration before a hurricane, the president today declared the swine flu a national emergency. The White House says it's not meant to scare anyone. It simply loosens some bureaucratic red tape to make it easier for hospitals to get what they need should the epidemic get worse. And health officials have now given doctors easier access to a new weapon against H1N1, an experimental drug called Peramivir, made by BioCryst Pharmaceuticals.
It's highly potent on the H1N1 virus. There were laboratory tests conducted by the CDC that showed that it's the most potent inhibitor of the H1N1 virus.
But the drug hasn't gone through all the necessary and time-consuming trials yet. So the FDA issued an emergency authorization to allow doctors to give the drug to the most seriously ill, those who aren't able to swallow Tamiflu or benefit from Relenza, which is usually inhaled. Peramivir, also an antiviral, is given intravenously. CBS News found 8 patients who were deathly ill but survived after being given the drug as a last resort, like 51-year-old John Boudreau. He got so sick in late August that he doesn't even remember spending the entire month of September in the hospital.
I am a lucky son of a gun to be here, no question about it.
Delays in producing the H1 vaccine means some of the children we saw getting shots today may have trouble getting the recommended second shot a few weeks from now. The White House said there'd be 120 million doses of the vaccine available by this fall. They've cut that prediction to 50 million doses they hope to have ready by mid-November. Jeff?
All right, Kimberly Dozier in Washington tonight. Kimberly, thank you. For more perspective now on the flu emergency, we are joined by our own Dr. Jennifer Ashton. Doctor, always good to see you.
You too, Jeff.
Let's start what this means in practical terms for doctors like you.
Well, it's really a preemptive measure, Jeff, so that hospitals can reshuffle their resources and modify their existing rules and regulations. So, for example, it enables them, if needed, to transport patients off-site to alternative locations if they become inundated, let's say, with flu patients. And it also enables them to hasten the process by which they take care of critically ill, potentially flu patients, and do away with some of the information and privacy issues that they normally are forced to abide by.
Let's talk about where the vaccine is being handed out, because in some cases, some of these places are now limiting the vaccine to children under the age of 4. How serious a problem is that for the kids who won't get it?
Well, potentially it is a serious issue, Jeff. We know that the H1N1 virus has a propensity to really attack young people, and that's young children as well as teenagers. And the CDC has outlined as a priority group for receiving the vaccine children ranging in age from 6 months to 24 years of age. So at this point, they have not yet said that it should only be children under 4. So potentially for all those older children, it could be a real issue.
Okay, now for those who don't know, when is the height of flu season? I guess they're different for seasonal and H1N1, and will there be enough vaccine by that time?
Well, it's a very important question. For the traditional seasonal flu, usually January to February is when we see the peak, as we call it, of the regular flu season. For swine flu or H1N1, which started in April, we're seeing the peak numbers actually right now in terms of 46 states in the country reporting widespread activity. The key point here, Jeff, is we don't know what the future will bring in terms of H1N1 cases, and that is largely why the president took this preparative step to declare this national emergency.
Basically, the earlier we get the vaccines, the better.
Absolutely.
Okay, Dr. Jennifer Ashton, thank you so much tonight.
The coronavirus. This is their new hoax.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China.
One day it's like a miracle, it will disappear. And we only have 15 people and they're getting better. I think we're doing a really good job in this country at keeping it down. Anybody that needs a test can have a test. And the tests are all perfect.
This blindsided the world.
I don't take responsibility at all.
We have to be smarter about the way this is being done. The federal government has to prioritize the resources. Look at where the problems are across this nation. California has 2,800 cases. Washington State, 2,200 cases. Florida, 1,200 cases. Massachusetts, about 800 cases. New York has 25,000 cases. New York has 25,000 cases. It has 10 times the problem that California has. The increase in the number of cases continues unabated. As a matter of fact, the rate of increase has gone up. We have the most sophisticated people you can get doing projections on this. They've been studying projections from China, South Korea, Italy, places all across this country. And what they're now seeing is that the rate of cases, the rate of new infections, is doubling about every 3 days. That is a dramatic increase in the rate of infection. And this whole discussion all along has been how fast does the rate of increase spread? And can we slow the rate of increase? We're not slowing it, and it is accelerating on its own. One of the forecasters said to me, we were looking at a freight train coming across the country. We're now looking at a bullet train because the numbers are going up that quickly. New York is the canary in the coal mine. New York is going first. We have the highest and the fastest rate of infection. What happens to New York is going to wind up happening to California and Washington State and Illinois. It's just a matter of time. We're just getting there first. Deal with the issue here. Deploy the resources, deploy the ventilators here in New York for our apex, and then after the apex passes here, once we're past that critical point, deploy the ventilators to the other parts of the country where they are needed. You know, ventilator is on average $20,000, $25,000 per ventilator. This is an expensive item. Nobody's going to build 40,000 ventilators unless they know someone is buying 40,000 ventilators. And that's what the federal government can give them with the DPA. I'd buy 40,000 ventilators. Caveat, they have to be here in 21 days. And then use them here. We hit the apex first. I will transport them anywhere you want in the country. I'm not asking you to give us 40,000 ventilators out infinitum. Address the curve here, and then that curve is going to be going all across the country. You hear what I'm saying here today? You're going to have the governor of California several weeks from now saying the same thing. You're going to have the governor of Illinois saying the same thing. The governor of the state of Washington saying the same thing. Do it right here. We're just the first case. We're just the first template. Do it right here, and then we'll move the goods. I'll move the professionals. I'll move the doctors and the nurses who can say, we can teach you how to do this because we went through it. We saw this in New York. But the inescapable conclusion is that the rate of infection is going up. It is spiking. The apex is higher than we thought, and the apex is sooner than we thought. That is a bad combination of facts. So slow the spread. We'll still keep doing everything we can, but it is clear that we must dramatically increase the hospital capacity to meet that highest apex. And we have to do it very quickly. Again, the apex could be here in as little as 14 to 21
Fox
days.
News last night, President Trump went after 3 Democratic governors who have been critical of the federal government's response to the coronavirus outbreak in the U.S. New York's Andrew Cuomo, Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer, and Washington State's Jay Inslee. Most notably, Trump questioned Cuomo's statement about how many ventilators New York needs.
New York is a bigger deal, but it's going to go also. But I have a feeling that a lot of the numbers that are being said in some areas are just bigger than they're going to be. I don't believe you need 40,000 or 30,000 ventilators. You know, you go into major hospitals sometimes, they'll have 2 ventilators. And now all of a sudden they're saying, can we order 30,000 ventilators? Your governor of Michigan, I mean, she's not stepping up. I don't know if she knows what's going on, but all she does is sit there and blame the federal government. She doesn't get it done, and we send her a lot. Now she wants a declaration of emergency, and, we'll have to make a decision on that. But Michigan is a very important state. I love the people of Michigan, what they do. I'm the one, I'm bringing back many, many car factories into Michigan, and she is a new governor, and it's not been pleasant. We have people like Governor Inslee. He should be doing more. He shouldn't be relying on the federal government. Governor Inslee, that's the state of Washington. He was a failed presidential candidate, and, he's always complaining.
So, putting aside the fact that it is incredible that this president is lashing out at governors and criticizing them and mocking them at this time, Jonathan Lemire, his refusal to use the Defense Production Act, his refusal to actually organize this from the top and streamline the production of supplies to get them to the states, only he has the power to do that. And President Trump is choosing not to help states deal with this crisis in the most quick and effective way. Let me say it again. President Trump is making the choice to not help the states in the most quick and effective way. He's making that choice and leaving this to them. And now I fear, Jonathan Lemire, and I wonder if you agree with this, what you see happening is the next phase of this county by county plan, which looks like total chaos, basically leaving it to the counties to figure out how to separate themselves from, worst to best. This is insanity, and I wonder what the governor's reactions must have been when they got this letter yesterday with this ridiculous, ridiculous plan.
So governors, Mika, are at the front line of this pandemic and have been from the beginning. And there is a great debate in state houses across the country as to how to best approach the federal government. Do you try to fight, or do you try to flatter President Trump? It's that dynamic where governors are making decisions. They know they need federal response. They can't do it on their own. So they're trying to deal with a unique situation, a president who pays an unprecedented amount of attention to, in particular, media coverage and how the governors treat him. And that's what we're seeing the last couple of days. My colleague and I, we reported on this story just yesterday, before news of this phone call President had with the governors, which I'll get to in a second, including Governor Cuomo, who told aides about a week or so ago. At the time, he was deeply frustrated with the federal response, but he figured the best way to motivate the president to do more would actually be to go on TV and flatter him, even though at that moment, Cuomo felt, the president hadn't done anything to warrant that praise, but he did. And he did then again later in a private phone call with the president. The president told people around him that, hey, Andrew Cuomo, he said really nice things about me, and then changed his own rhetoric to the governor. Now, we have seen the last couple of days, it has now changed back. That has been very hot and cold. But yesterday in the interview with Fox News reflects what happened earlier in the day in a phone call the president had with the governors, in which Jay Inslee really urged him to step up because the president had said to them, and this is the message we're getting from him over and over, that the states should play the primary role and the federal government, even though it has vastly larger resources, will be their backup, will help as needed. And Jay Inslee said to him in that call, we don't need a backup, we need a Tom Brady, meaning we need a starting star quarterback to lead the way. We need a president to take the helm here. And Trump, irritated by that on the call, and then we heard it again last night, is looking for the states to step up. And that's also why with the Defense Production Act, Mika, as a final point, he has been reluctant to say it because this, in a way, keeps the onus on the states rather than the federal government's mobilization if things take a turn for the worse.
So really quickly, Zeke Emanuel, and I know we want to get to John Meacham, but the concern is every day when the president sort of throws out these bombs, that he's deflecting from our total incompetence at this point because there is no mass testing. How far away are we from real testing across the board? Not some testing for some testing for others, testing that doesn't match. How far away are we from being out of the dark?
Honestly, Mika, I don't know because we've had so many mistakes with the testing. I do think we have massively improved the testing, but it's nowhere near adequate. We have, about 400,000 or 500,000 tests in this country, comparable to South Korea, and yet we're 7 times larger than South Korea. So it gives you a sense of how far behind. And we have to do smart testing. It's not just test. We need to know what the prevalence in the community is. We need to have some good surveys. And we need to also begin testing people who aren't asymptomatic. The threshold for testing still remains way too high, and getting the results is too long. I just got an email yesterday from a professor out in California. 9 days they've been waiting for the result. That is totally unacceptable. And again, this is just time we wasted between January and now, not getting things arranged and having multiple mistakes along the way to get testing out. And the last thing I would say is we need to pull that testing out of hospitals. You don't need health professionals risking getting sick and having lots of people who might have coronavirus right near hospitals. We have to get it all out of the hospitals and healthcare system into these mobile drive-through, walk-up places. That's just as important because we need to keep those people who might be positive away from a hospital emergency room where there may be people who aren't positive.
John Meacham, it's been fascinating to watch as Jonathan Lemire just reported out. These governors learn what world leaders have learned over the last 3 years in dealing with Donald Trump, and that is that flattery might end up getting you what you need in a crisis. It might end up getting you those ventilators and PPE. Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, who's known Donald Trump for decades, clearly knows this and has known this for a long time. So they've sort of had to tap dance around the personality that's in the Oval Office to get literally life-saving protection, life-saving equipment. And there have been moments, you've heard Governor Cuomo say, for the life of me, I don't understand why we haven't invoked the Defense Production Act. But by and large, they've learned that flattery is the way to get what you need from this president.
Yeah, and it's fundamentally un-American. I mean, one of the reasons we fought the American Revolution was to avoid having our fates be subject to the whims of a king. At least in the popular imagination, that was a central force behind the creation of the Republic. America was supposed to put reason at the center of the national enterprise. And I can't imagine another situation which is more designed, or better for the centrality of data and the dictates of science. And the fact that this sounds partisan is heartbreaking, but we're living in a polarized pandemic. It's incredible. We've managed now to take everything, including a life and death, invisible and totally chaos-inducing disease, and turn it into a red-blue issue. My heart sank last night when I was looking at the map of the outbreaks and realized how closely it seems to track the red-blue county-by-county map. I'd urge folks to look at that because I think, tragically, there's going to be some reflection of people's, there's clearly a reflection of how people view the virus with their political views. And one of the things we have to figure out a way to do in the midst of the fear, in the midst of the anxiety, is can we follow the data? Can we follow the doctors? And can the doctors, to go to your point, resist that monarchical pressure to make the king happy? Seems to me that's a central obligation of the medical professionals and of the citizens. You know, let's, if there's any way at all, let's try not to fall into this ambient tribalism. You know, you can disagree with the president on everything and still think maybe he has a point on this or that. You can be for the president on just about everything and think, you know what, I think he's got that wrong. That's called reason, right? That's called America. You know, you follow the data. And at this point, it's a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
Mika, if you
let's
dare
just
raise
focus.
hell, right, and you, sorry, Mika, I was just going to say, if you dare raise hell, if you, because literally the life of your citizens depends on it, he calls in to Sean Hannity's show and rips you as a failed presidential candidate. That's the balance these governors are looking at.
Yeah, but the lesson is, no matter what you do, he won't be there for you when you need him, and he'll turn on you in a heartbeat. So I don't know. Maybe that approach just puts off the inevitable. But we'll stick to facts here because I do agree with John Meacham. As you watch this pandemic sort of play out, it is so polarized at this time, given where we were before it broke out. But look at this fact. In Palm Beach County, Florida, okay, where there are many, many senior citizens, where Mar-a-Lago sits, population of 1.4 million Floridians. Here's how many tests have been given. 1,166. That's 0.1% of the third largest county in the state, and also an area that is supposed to be the next hot spot. We are way behind. And the folks on the front lines who are predicting a horror show in places like New York City, I don't know. I'm not sure how they turn this around at this point. Still ahead on Morning Joe, from our NBC affiliate in Boston, surging coronavirus cases in New York prompt serious measures in New England. We'll talk to Boston Mayor Marty Walsh about his city's fight against the pandemic straight ahead. But first, as Dr. Emanuel writes, Trump's not a doctor. He's only playing one on TV. And the president was at it again.
Romney, Senator Lee,
Senator Gardner, Senator Rick Scott.
Senator Rick Scott also. Two of them were in contact
I guess Rick is coming out.
With the critical stimulus package vote expected.
Romney's in isolation?
Yes.
Gee, that's too bad. Go ahead.
Detect sarcasm there,
No,
sir?
none whatsoever.